Okay. So I'll share the link with you after the class. So let's start. So I'm going to share my screen with you. I hope the screen is visible. So is the screen visible? You should be able to see an Excel sheet. That's amazing. So the first chapter, it starts with comparing different forms of organization. So whenever you're forming a company, you can form it in different ways. So it starts with that. So you can have a sole proprietorship, you can have a partnership, and you can have a company or a corporate. Okay. The chapter also talks about like what are the advantages of having a sole proprietorship. It is easy to form, you are the single owner, whatever profit you get directly flows to you, it will be taxed as your income, right? Problems with sole proprietorship, you hold the whole liability. So if something goes wrong in the business, then you are responsible for it, you can be sued for your business. Partnership, similar to sole proprietorship, but you can have different partners who come together to start a company. Now there is, in partnership there are generally general partners who are responsible for management and who hold the liability, and there are limited partners who are just like investors. So there are general partners who hold the liability, who take part in the management of the business, and also can be investing their own money. And there can be a limited partner who only invest, who is not responsible for management, and who do not take part in the liability of the business, right? Partnerships have their own problems too, because income will be taxed at personal tax rate instead of the partnership paying any taxes. So there are specific advantages of forming a company, forming a business as a company. The advantage is the shareholders are liable only for their investment, nothing more than that. So maximum amount of money you can lose when you invest in a company like Apple is whatever you paid for the share. You cannot be sued more than that. You don't have to pay more than that. That's the biggest benefit of forming a company. And also, companies are separate legal entities, so they pay taxes on their own. So that's also one of the advantages, right? So most people or most organizations, when they grow bigger, they prefer getting formed as a company or a corporation instead of being a partnership or a sole proprietorship. And companies are formed in Canada in provincial manner. They are not federally formed. They can be federally formed, then we call them crown corporations, but most companies are formed in a provincial manner. So you get yourself registered with the relevant province. Okay. So this was the first part that the chapter talks about. The next part is little bit difficult to understand and important for your exam. So please pay attention. So whenever you are investing in a company, you get some returns out of those companies. Those returns are called as dividends. So if company is making some profits, it will share those profits with its shareholders in form of dividends. Now, the chapter talks about taxation of those profits. So how does that work? So if a company is a normal company, if a company is a normal company or a normal corporation, in that case, there is incidence of double taxation. So what does double taxation mean? Point A, profits will be taxed at company's tax rate. So the whatever profit the company is making, the company first pays tax on that. Second, dividends that shareholders receive will be taxed at a preferential dividend rate. So first things first, if you're investing in a normal company and you're getting paid dividends, then you're suffering from double taxation. First, whatever profit the company makes, they pay taxes on that. After tax, whatever remains, some part of it, they share it with investors. So whatever an investor gets, so I'm an investor in Apple, I get some dividends from Apple, then I pay tax on those dividends at a preferential rate, not at my normal rate. It is little bit lower than the normal rate. So dividends are taxed at a lower rate than normal income if it is a normal company. Okay. Now there is a special form of company called as REITs. It is income trust. So if you're investing in a REIT, what is REITs? REITs are companies that invest in real estate. And a special property of REIT is they do not retain any kind of profits with themselves. Whatever they make, they share it with investors. So they do not retain anything with them except the expenses, right? All the profits are shared with investors. So if you're investing in REITs, you do not have double taxation. So it's only single incidence of taxes. So it has no corporate tax, but individuals pay taxes at their normal rates. So REITs dividend or REIT income is not taxed at a preferential rate like normal companies. REIT income is taxed at a normal rate. But the point is you only pay tax once. You do not pay tax twice. Any questions till now? So the taxation part, is it clear? If you're investing in a company, how you will be taxed? Double taxes in case of normal company, single taxes, but at a higher rate if it is a REIT. That's great. So this was like 70% of what is important in chapter 1, right? 30% rest of it is agency problem. So what is agency problem? So there is a distinction between three players when you are considering a company. So there are people or entities who are managers. There is a board of directors that supervise managers, and there is shareholders who own the company. So there are managers who run the company, day-to-day operations, board of directors who oversee manager. So they are like a regulatory body. They see if everything is okay. They're appointed by shareholders, and shareholders actually own the company. So shareholders want managers to act in best interest of shareholders because managers are agents of shareholders. So principal in this case is shareholder who appoints managers as agents. But sometimes what happens, managers do not act in the interest of shareholders, they act in self-interest. So managers may take decisions that profit him rather than profiting shareholders in the long run. So sometimes they take short-term decisions that may inflate stock price, but they have long-term consequences. For example, not following pollution norms. It can boost your profits because you're making more money. But the long-term reputation and legal suits can damage the company in the long run. So this is the principal agency problem, that managers sometimes act in their own self-interest rather than in the interest of shareholders. Okay. Now to factor this in, shareholders put out some measures like they try to monitor managers' compensation. They try to make managers' compensation linked to stocks, long-term stocks, like long-term stock results rather than short-term. So they try to influence managers to act in shareholders' best interest. But even that can create problems, because if managers are only focusing on shareholders, that creates a huge issue, because companies also work with labor and they also work in a society. So sometimes things that are good for shareholders may not be good for laborers and may not be good for society. A classic example of it could be Amazon. So there is a huge lawsuits going on in United States against Amazon because it doesn't pay well in for to its labor. But it is good for shareholders. If it is paying less to labor, that means more profits are there for shareholders, but they that may not be good in the long interest. So there can be issues. So two countries or two constituents have tried to avoid this. So most of the European countries, if you see, they have representation of labor and society on board of directors of each company. So if you go to Germany, like Volkswagen or any kind of German companies, they have representation from labor and they have representation from society on the company's boards. So they try to balance it out. Even Japan, they have representation from society as well as representation from labor. But that is not the case in North America. Now, I'm not arguing which system is better, because companies are owned by shareholders and companies should act in the benefit of shareholders, right? And shareholders should be the activist. So if you find company not doing good in the interest of overall society, the shareholders can pull their money away. So it has its own mechanics, but there are different systems in different countries and different way of handling it. So two important points. One is agency problem. Managers act in their own self-interest sometimes rather than shareholders. And second one is managers, even though if they're acting in shareholders' interest, they can damage the society as a whole. So you have to be careful about it. Any questions? Okay. So that's great. So let's start with chapter 1, problems. So in the last class, you did bunch of problems. I have highlighted few of them that I feel are important and we are going to discuss in class. Okay. And I've also uploaded the solution of chapter 1 problems on D2L. So check it out after the class. So the entire solution that we are going to discuss along with the additional questions, it's on all there on D2L right now. Okay. So first problem, so this was actually the sixth problem that you solve. You are a shareholder in a company. The company earns $2 per share before taxes. Once it has paid taxes, it will distribute everything to as dividend. The company's tax rate is given 34%. The personal tax rate on dividend is 18%, and other income is taxed at 40%. How much is left after paying all taxes? Now it's a normal company, so there will be double taxation. So first, the companies pay tax. So company is making $2 and it is paying 34% tax. So how much is left? 2 into 1 minus 34%. So 2 into 76%. So $1.32 is remaining with company after paying taxes. Then this $1.32 will be given out as dividends, again on which individual shareholders would have to pay tax. Now people go wrong here. When a company is taxed twice, you get a lower tax on dividend, right? So the lower tax is 18% instead of 40%. So whatever $1.32 you're getting, it will be taxed at 18% and not 40%. So you pay 18% tax, so rest of it remains with you as dividend. So if company gets $2 in earning, you are left with $1.08. Any questions about this? No, these are not for marks. Like these are for marks. In the last class, you did a bunch of problems and you uploaded. So that is like for attendance purpose, like 7% marks are allocated to in-class activities. So if you're 60%, if you're there 60% of the time and you upload your work, you will get those marks. But not these. These are important for your quizzes though. Quizzes and final exam. Okay. So next problem. So next problem is very similar to the first one, except that it's a REIT. Now in REIT, you have to remember REITs do not have double taxes. They only have singular taxes, and the taxes are higher than the actual dividend rate. So as it is a REIT, there is no corporate tax. So $2 will be paid out as dividend. Now this $2 will then be taxed at 40% instead of 18%. That's the difference. So $2 will be taxed at 40%. So you're left with $1.20.
Sorry, question. So why would it be 40% under REIT and not under dividends?
So dividends enjoy lower taxes because government recognizes that you are being taxed twice. That's why they mention lower taxes on normal company dividends. But if it is a REIT, the government knows that you are not being taxed twice. That's why you have to pay it at a higher rate.
Does it still like count as a dividend then, or does it just count as
Yeah,
income?
it is still counted as dividend, but those dividends have a special provision in Income Tax Act that they are taxed at a higher rate.
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so the next problem that you did was you are a CEO of a company and are considering a new project. If it is accepted, it will add $1 million to the value of company. So your company's value, shareholder value, would grow up by 1 million. If you decide to proceed with the project, you realize that you will have to work extra hours, like extra 8 hours per week, and the value of that for a year is $51,000 according to you. Assume that your salary will not be adjusted, so you earn the same thing, except you give up $51,000 to get into this project, right? Your salary will not be adjusted to reflect this extra work, and that net benefit to you is only consideration in deciding whether you accept this project or not. So in any kind of decision that you make as a company's shareholder or as a company manager, you have to always weigh cost and benefit. What is the cost out here? Cost in this case is $51,000 of your time that you're going to give. Now benefit, it depends on what they're giving. So let's see what is the benefit, and if benefit is more than cost, you will accept the project. If benefit is less than cost, you will reject the project. So what will you do if you own 100% of the company? So if you own 100% of the company and company's value go up by $1 million, that entire 1 million belongs to you. So you're getting benefit of 1 million, your cost is 51,000. So would you accept the project? Yes, because benefits are more now. So first condition, if you own the entire company, you would of course accept it. What would be your decision if you own 1% of the company? So if company is going up $1 million in value, 1% of that is $10,000. So your benefit is 10 grand, your cost is 51 grand. So would you accept this project? No, because cost is more than benefit here. Benefit 10, cost 51. Okay. Second situation, what would be your decision if you owned 3% of the company's equity and board of directors promised you $25,000 if your company's value increased more than 50,000? So what are you going to get? 3% of equity. So you get 3% of 1 million increase. So 3% of that is $30,000. Along with that, you get $25,000 if the company grows by more than 50,000, which is the case. Company is growing by 1 million and the condition was 50,000. So you are of course going to get 25,000 also. So you're going to get 3% of 1,030,000 plus 25,000. So if you see, look at the solution, you are effectively making 3% of 1 million, that is 30,000, plus you're getting 25,000. So your benefit is 55, your cost was 51. So would you accept it? Yes. Okay. Any doubts till 1, 2, and 3? Any questions till 1, 2, and 3? No. The last one is little bit tricky. So what are they saying? The value of the company is not growing by 1 million. You're getting the bonus, of course, you're getting the bonus of 25,000, but the value is not growing by 1 million. You want to find how much growth is acceptable to you so that it is more than 51,000. So once again, they are not saying, they want to find out how much equity should rise in the company, how much value of the company should rise so that your cost of 51,000 is justified, right? So you have to assume that increase is going to be X. Increase is unknown. 25,000 you get, 55,000 you put. So how much should be X? So let's see how to do that. So 25,000 is the bonus that you're going to get, plus your 3% owner. So 3% of X is what you're going to get. And the cost should be more than 51,000. So what should be X? So you find it out, 25,000 goes to this side, it becomes subtraction. So 51 minus 25 is 26,000. 0.3, that is 3% of X is 26,000. So X is 26 divided by 3%. So it is 866,000. So if your equity grows by 0.8 million, only then you would accept it. So if it is growing more than 0.8 million, you will take the project. So read the fourth one little bit carefully. Assuming that accepting the project no longer adds 1 million to the company's equity, but rather increases the equity value by an unknown value called as X. How much should the X be so that you accept the project? So answer to that is X should be approximately 0.8 million or $866,000. Any questions? This was a little bit difficult to understand. So if someone has not understood it, I'll explain it once more. Okay, that's great. Okay, I'll explain it once more. No problem. So what are they saying? You're still getting $25,000 in bonus and you're getting 3% of company's increase in value. But you don't know how much value would it increase by. So you're saying how much should it increase so that my cost of 51,000 is justified. So if you put it in equation, you're going to get 25,000 plus you're going to get 3% of the increase. But you don't know how much that increase is going to be. So they are asking you to find that increase. So 25,000 plus 3% of that increase should be greater than 51,000 to accept the project. So 3% of X should be greater than 26, because if you move this to the left hand side, 51, this 25,000 positive becomes negative. So 51 minus 25 is 26. 3% of X should be greater than 26. X should be 26 divided by 3%. So it is 866,000. Okay. So next one is the right example for principal agent problem that we discussed. So the manager should act in the best interest of shareholders, also considering the society and the labor. So let's see what's happening. Consider a case of SPB Limited, a solar panel and battery manufacturing company. You are the CEO of SPB. In producing solar panels and batteries, certain toxic chemical waste is generated and proper disposal is very expensive. A recently hired engineer has brought to you a project codenamed Stealth Death, or SD for short. The SD involves constructing underground chambers in which the toxic waste would be dumped. Since your company is in a remote location, it is very unlikely that regulators will find out this way that you're disposing it. The engineer has designed chambers to contain hazardous waste, and it is having 25% chance that it will go into groundwater. So there is less than 25% chance that the waste will leak into groundwater and make it contaminated for the nearby city. There is an upfront cost to constructing XT, but the projected cost savings for ST rather than normal disposal look positive. So it will result in significant cost savings for the next 10 years, which will impact your bonus. After 10 years, it will be full and other disposal mechanisms needs to be considered. So what should you do? So if you, there are two options. If you go ahead with the project, you will get good bonus for the next 10 years. But there would be damage to company's reputation in the long run if the regulators find out, right? If you reject the project, you give up on short-term gain. You don't get the bonus for next 10 years, but the long-term reputation of the company remains intact, which is good for the shareholders. So you should always act in benefit or in advantage to the shareholders rather than your own self-interest, and you should always consider long-term benefit for shareholders rather than short-term benefit. So let's read the solutions. There are many considerations for you as a CEO. One of them is cost benefit analysis of constructing the project and reaping the savings in disposable costs. That should show whether the ST project increases shareholder value. In addition, if your bonus is tied to earning, you are tempted to take on this project because you will earn more. But there are costs involved. The cost is it can damage the water, which can be harmful to the nearby city and which can have a damning impact. There could be legal suits and future problems for the company. So in means ethically it's wrong to take on the project even though it is leading to lot of cost savings. Okay, any questions with 4? Okay, that's great. So in the next question, the last one, they generally give you a stock, the date when it is trading, they give you ask and bid, and stock, a day when it is trading, and bid and ask prices. So in stock markets, you can put two types of orders. You can put market orders or you can put limit orders. If you put market orders, then if you're a buyer, so important, if you're putting a market order to buy, it will always get executed at ask price. If you're putting market order to buy, buying mark order always gets executed at ask price, because what is ask? Ask is price which sellers are demanding. So it is seller's price. So buying order market always gets executed at ask. Buying order or selling order market always gets executed at bid. Limit order market to buy always gets executed when the price is reached. Limit order for selling always gets executed when the price is reached. Okay. So once again, let's try to divide it further. There is buy side, there is sell side. Buy side, you can put two orders: market order buy, limit order buy. Market order buy gets executed at ask price. Limit order buy gets executed at the mentioned price if it ever reaches. Okay. Other side of it then can be market order to sell and market order and limit order to sell. Market order sell gets executed at bid price, and limit order sell executed at the mentioned price. So let's see, you'll understand it more when we do this problem. So this was given to you. Suppose you decide to use market order to buy 500 shares of this stock on September 14 and then sell 500 stock using market order on September 15. So what are you doing? You're buying on 14th and selling on 15th. So when you buy on 14th, if you're buying, you get ask price. And when you sell on 15th, if you're selling, you get bid price. So buyers always get ask price, seller always gets bid price. So how will that work? So you are buying $500, 500 shares at $14.6, which was the ask price. So you're spending $7,300, and then you're selling it at bid price, that was 15.04. 15.04 was the bid price, and you're selling 500 stocks. So your gain is 7520 minus 7300. Now, the second question asks you, what happens if you put a limit order? So suppose you decide to use limit order instead of market orders. On September 14th, you put a limit order to buy 500 stock at 14.58, and 15th, you put a limit order to sell at 15.08. And both orders were executed because prices reached at that level. So what would happen? So limit orders always get executed at that whatever mentioned price, otherwise they don't execute, right? But in this case, they're saying that those got executed. So you bought 500 shares at 14.58, so 7290 was spent, and you sold it at 15.08, so 7540 you got. So 7540 minus 7290, you made $250. So again, two types of orders are possible: market orders and limit orders. Market order buy gets executed at ask price. Market order sell gets executed at bid price. Limit orders always execute at the mentioned price. Otherwise, they do not execute. Any questions? Okay. So before we start with chapter 2, how about we take a 10 minutes break, get our coffees, and then we can start. So should we take a 10 minutes break, or should I just continue? Okay. Anyone who wants to take a break? Okay, so let's continue. So let's take a break after chapter 2. That would be better. I'll share the screen again. Now, chapter 2 talks about financial statements. So what are financial statements? So I'll show you a financial, we'll discuss some actual financial statements. So until it loads. So what are financial statements? So financial statements are way of sharing information between managers and shareholders. So managers share information with shareholders using financial statements. Because if you're a shareholder in Apple, you are not concerned about day-to-day operations, but after regular intervals, you need to know what Apple is doing. You do not have time to get involved in day-to-day operations. So you would want the company to share some information with you. Now that information is provided to you using financial statements. Now, financial statements are generally filed quarterly, yearly, and on major events. So if a company is completing a quarter, you'll see a quarterly financial statement. If a company is completing a year, you will see a yearly financial statement. Or if anything major happens with the company, for example, there was a recent news of Oracle buying TikTok, right? So Microsoft was also bidding for it, but it went eventually to Oracle. So now Oracle has to disclose its financial statement and impact of that buying to the shareholders. So companies disclose financial statements either quarterly, yearly, or on some major occasions. Okay. So we are discussing chapter 2 rather than problems. So we are discussing highlights of chapter 2. Then I'll break you up into different breakout rooms to do problems. So let's look at financial statements of Suncor. So Suncor stock is cross-listed. So it is also listed in New York and it is also listed in Toronto. So I'm looking at the one in New York. So it's the same company that is listed on 2 exchanges. So what type of financial statements are there? There are basically 5 types of financial statements. There is income statement, also called as profit and loss. There is balance sheet or statement of position. There is cash flow statement. There is management analysis and statement of equity. And there are notes to account. Amongst them, 3 are the most important statement: income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow statement. So we are going to discuss first income statement. So we'll go to financials. And we are looking at income statement. So this is yearly income statements. We can also do quarterly, but we are doing yearly. So what is an income statement? It is a flow statement that shows how revenues are converted into profit for shareholders. So revenues get converted into earning per share. Okay, once again, income statement is a flow statement that shows how earnings are converted into profits, or how revenues are converted into profits. So like 2019 we are looking at. So you have total revenues, $38 billion that the company made. Cost of revenues is direct expense. So Suncor is producing oil barrels and natural gas. So how much was spent directly to produce those barrels and natural gas? Then you get gross profit of 15 billion. Then you adjust operating expenses. So operating expenses are non-direct expenses. So it can be whatever you're spending on, let's say, HR or marketing or finance and all those things. So 13 billion was spent on that. You got operating income of 1.9 billion. Then there is some operating income, means there is some other source income. So you adjust it by that. You adjust it by other expenses that you encountered. Other expenses can be interest expense or depreciation expense, non-cash expenses. You get pre-tax income, you pay taxes on that, and eventually it flows to earning per share, and finally you get dilution. So I'll explain it more. So this is how it looks in real life. So I'll explain it in a Word document in a better way. So once again, what is an income statement? Income statement is a flow statement that shows how revenues are converted into earning per share, how revenues reflect towards shareholders. So you always start an income statement with revenues or sales. They are also called as top line. So you always start with top line. Then you deduct direct expenses related to that specific product. So in case of Suncor, it is whatever cost it is incurring to produce that barrel of oil or unit of natural gas that it is producing. So then you get gross profit. From gross profit, you deduct indirect expenses that you have incurred on marketing, on sales, on executives, on salaries, etc. So you get operating profits, or also known as EBITDA, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. So again, gross profit, you deduct indirect expenses, you get operating profit. Another name for operating profit is earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization, right? EBITDA. From that, you deduct depreciation and amortization. What is depreciation? It is non-cash expense that you incur because you are using some assets. So you're using, let's say, some machinery. So you're not spending on that machinery, but you're using that machinery. So you will expense it out, expense part of it out this year. So it is, you're not actually spending cash on depreciation, but you're using your assets to produce. That's why you take depreciation out. Amortization is same like depreciation, except it is on non-fixed assets. So it can be patents, copyrights. You're using some part of this patent, so that's why you amortize it. After deducting depreciation and amortization, you're left with EBIT, earnings before interest and tax. Then you deduct interest, you get earnings before tax. Interest is paid to bondholders and on loans that you have taken. Then earnings before tax, you deduct tax, you subtract tax from it, you get net income for shareholders, also known as bottom line. Net income for shareholders, also known as bottom line. Now this net income, you divide it by number of shares, you get earning per share. So how much company is earning every share for every shareholder per share? Okay. Now, sometimes you have to adjust this earning per share for dilution. What does dilution means? You may have given some employee stock options, or you may have issued some convertible bonds. So employee stock option means employees can buy shares at an fixed cost, but they haven't bought it right now. In future, they may buy. So they have that option. Or bondholders can convert their bonds into shares. They haven't done it right now, but they can do it in future. So you can adjust your earnings for those dilutions. And finally, you're left with EPS, diluted EPS, or adjustment after dilution. So this is how an income statement works. It starts from revenue and it ends up with EPS, earning per share. Any questions with that? Any questions with EPS? Or any questions with income statement? This is extremely important because this is the baseline on which you will do ratios. So you need to understand this. Okay, so no questions, so I'll proceed. The next statement is balance sheet. So let's look at balance sheet of Suncor. Now balance sheet has three components: assets, liabilities, and equity. Assets, liabilities, and equity. Okay. Balance sheet is a position statement. So as on date, what is the position of your company? How much asset it has, how much liabilities it has. Okay, so I'll increase the screen size. Okay. So balance sheet shows how much asset it has, how much liabilities the company has, and how much equity the company has. So for Suncor, total assets were 89 billion, total liabilities were 47 billion, and assets minus liability, whatever is left for shareholders, was 42 billion. So let's discuss it in more details. So, three parts to a balance sheet. Assets, one is already taken. So first is assets, second is liabilities, and third is shareholders' equity. So what are asset? Asset is what you own, what the company owns, whatever the company has, right? Assets are divided into current assets, which can be converted into cash, which also includes cash. So current assets are cash and cash equivalents that those are assets that can be easily converted into cash. Then you have long-term or fixed assets, right? That cannot be converted into cash right now, but they are used for production, for doing sales. And there is goodwill that the company has. Goodwill is nothing but brand value that the company has. Okay. So assets are divided into three things: current assets, long-term assets, and goodwill. Liabilities are the second side of balance sheet. Liabilities are what type of loans you have taken. So it's the total loans and debt that the company has. Liabilities are divided into current liabilities, which are due this year, which are due right now, and long-term liabilities, which are due in the near future. Okay, in the long run future. So current liabilities is what the company owes, which has current liabilities that are due right now, like within a year, and long-term liabilities that are due beyond a year. And the third component is shareholders' equity, also called as book value. So what is that? It is composed of two parts: retained earnings. Retained earning means whatever profits the company has generated, which it has kept in the business, and shareholders' interest in the company. So that is nothing but how much money the company got from shareholders when it issued an IPO, which is not the current value. So this shareholders value or shareholders equity or book value is not the current value. It is the value of profits the company has retained till now, and also how much money it got from shareholders. Okay. Example of this would be why you shouldn't confuse it with, let's say, current value. If you look at Tesla had an IPO at $14 per share, right? So that $14 will come here. So Tesla's shareholder or book value would be whatever profits it has retained in the business till now, whatever profit it has kept. And what was the IPO value? IPO value was $14 per share. That is what it got from shareholders, right? Right now, the current price before the split happened was $5,000 per share. So market cap can be extremely different. Market value can be extremely different than book value. But do we have importance of book value? Yes, we have importance of book value, because book value is the worst case value. So if a company closes down, it will sell all its assets, pay off its liabilities, and whatever is left, it will share it with shareholders. That is nothing but book value. Now, why it is called as balance sheet? It is called as balance sheet because these equations always hold true. So if you see, assets will be equal to liabilities plus shareholder equity. So if assets goes up, shareholder equity goes up. If liabilities goes up, like assets go down because you have to pay those liabilities back. So this equation always holds. Assets equals to liability plus shareholders equity. Or you can reframe it: shareholders equity equals difference between assets and liability. Any questions with balance sheet? So what is book value of Suncor, book value of Suncor is $42 billion. Market cap may be different. Let's look at market cap actually. I'll open it in different window. It is taking long time to load. So unless it loads, we'll go to cash flow statement. So this is the third important statement. And why do we look at cash flow statement? And cash flow statement is one of the most important statement that a manager or an investor can look at. It is even more important than income statement. You will see a lot of talks about EPS, earning per share, but earning per share is less important than cash flows. Now the reason is income statement doesn't show the reality because you have non-cash expenses there. So you have expenses like, let's say, depreciation in income statement. Now you're not actually paying depreciation. You're using your assets, but you're not paying anything for them, right? So that's why the reality is not there. And also, credit sales are shown as income in income statement. Even though you're not getting any money from it, you're selling something on credit, you will still show it as an income. So income statement is not reality. That is why cash flow statement is more important than income statement. I'm not saying income statements are not important, but importance wise for a manager and for an investor, cash flow statement have higher importance. So what is a cash flow statement? Cash flow statement is divided into three parts: operating cash flow, investing cash flow, financing cash flow, and whatever cash position is there, right? So operating cash flow for Suncor was 10 billion. Investing cash flow was an outflow of 5 billion. Financing cash flow was an outflow. Minus means outflow, positive means inflow. So financing was outflow of 5, investing was outflow of 5, and total cash it had at the end of 2019 was 19 billion. Okay. So I'll explain it what these three things mean. So cash flow statement is important because it shows the actual cash situation. It doesn't show accounting, but accounting profits, it shows actual cash profits that you're getting. Now cash flow statement is divided into 4 parts. So 3 are flows and 1 is adjustment. So it will have operating cash flow. So what is operating cash flow? It is the cash that the company is generating from the main business. Whatever cash the company is generating from the main business, core business, that will be cash, operating cash flow. Now, what is the main business for Suncor? The main business for Suncor is generating natural gas and generating oil. So whatever cash it is generating from its main business, it will be operating cash. Now it will have cash inflows, whatever cash you're getting from the business, and cash outflows, whatever cash you're paying into the business. If it is positive, it means cash inflows are more than outflows. So you're getting more out of the business in cash rather than spending on it. If it is negative, it means your outflows are more than inflows. Now, how do you generally calculate operating cash flow? So you calculate it from net income, which is discussed in the book. So you take net income, you adjust it for non-cash expenses, because in net income, while calculating net income, you have considered non-cash expenses like depreciation. But in reality, you have actually not spent anything on that. So all the non-cash expenses that you have deducted from net income, you will add them back. So all non-cash expenses are added to net income. Same way, there are certain revenues that you have included in net income, but you have not generated cash. For example, if you're doing credit sales, you will factor that revenue in your income statement, but you have not actually got the cash. So net income, you add non-cash expenses and you deduct non-cash income to get cash, operating cash flow. Once again, net income, you adjust by non-cash expenses, and that is you add them back and you deduct non-cash income to get operating cash flow. Operating cash flow is very important because it shows how much cash you're actually making from the business. The second part of cash flow is investing cash flow. Investing means how much cash you're generating on investments. So if you're purchasing investment, cash is flowing out of your pocket, so that will be cash outflow. If you're selling your investments and generating cash from it, cash is coming in, so it will be cash inflow. So outflow when you invest, inflow when you get money from your investments. So how much cash you generate on investment, how much cash you spend on investment. So if you're spending on investment, it will be outflow. If you're getting money from investments by selling your assets or something, then it will be inflow. And finally, financing cash flow, how much cash you're generating from debt holders and equity holders. So if you issue bonds and generate some cash, it will be cash inflow. If you issue stocks and generate cash from shareholders, it will be cash inflow. But if you pay interest to bondholders, it will be cash outflow. If you pay dividend to shareholders, it would be cash outflow. So inflows and outflows from shareholders and bondholders are financing cash flows.
Sorry, what was that called? What was the name of it?
Financing, finance.
No, I meant for like the term for net income plus non-cash minus non-cash.
Yeah, so this is operating cash flow. So operating cash flow is calculated by using net income from income statement, adding all non-cash expenses and subtracting all non-cash income.
Thank you.
Okay. And finally, you adjust, you get cash position. What is cash position? How much cash you had, how much cash you generated in this given year, and what are you left with? Okay. So let's go back to Suncor and understand the numbers. Now you have to tell me, operating cash flow from Suncor is $6 billion positive. What does that mean? It means from its main business, Suncor has generated $6 billion. So it was generating more money than it was spending. So that's why it's positive. Next, investing cash flow is $5 billion for Suncor. What does that mean? And it's a negative sign. Negative means outflow. So Suncor made investments of $5 billion this year. Made it. So it spent on investment. Did not get back. It spent. Financing cash flow is $700 million right now, right? 0.7 billion. So it's 700 million. So what does that mean? It gave money back. That's why it's an outflow. It's not generating money from debt holders or equity holders. It is paying interest and paying dividends. It did not generate bonds, or it did not take money from debt or equity this year. It actually spent 700 millions paying interest and paying dividends. And it is left with $18 billion right now. It started the year with 19 billion, but it is spending money. So that's why it is left with 18 billion. Any questions with all three statements: income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow? please ask if you do not understand it, because I hope you watched the recorded video before coming into the class, so you had some idea, but I've also tried to explain it because it's important. And this is the building block for ratios. So if you do not understand these three statements, ratios become increasingly more difficult. Okay, I know it is a lot to take in. So what I'll do is we'll break for 10 minutes and then I'll give you time to solve some problems. I do not expect you to do all of them, but at least one or two, and try to submit it. Okay. So it's 1 o'clock at my end. So we'll take a break for 10 minutes. Just try to relax your mind and think of whatever we have discussed. And let's meet again at 1 at 10. Okay.
Did I mess up my start time?
Sorry.
Did I mess up my start time? I thought we started at 1 today.
Yeah, we started at not 1. So we started at 12.
Oh, dear.
Oh yeah, so
That's
it
my
is,
bad. I've got my start times in my calendar wrong, I guess.
yeah, because it is 12 to 2. Almost 2.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry for that.
No, I am, because I just missed out your entire lesson.
Yeah.